Welcome everybody back to Spare Bedroom Studios. I am honored today to sit down on Soul Spotlight with a leader who's been instrumental in championing the mental health and resilience of Alberta's frontline heroes. Jerry Galliford, an Alberta Sheriff responsible for everything from courthouse security to highway patrol. Also founder and president of the Alberta First Responders Association, whose guiding mission is to empower the implementation of practical and immediate solutions for mental health support, suicide prevention program for all Alberta First Responders on a priority basis. Jerry, welcome.
Thank you.
How's it going today?
It's good, thank you.
Rainy as hell.
A little bit rainy.
Yeah. Thank you so much for coming out. As we're both aware, we kind of had this connection through. This is kind of how I was aware of you through previous workplace, and then I thought, the idea that I have for this podcast is like, I want to create a platform to put people on, right? That's essentially what it is. If I genuinely see someone's doing cool stuff and it's not even about what they're doing, it's the character and the motivation and the ego surrounding it, which is a big thing that I talk about, is managing your ego, managing expectations, and how that kind of revolves around everything you have to do, especially if you're getting successful in any area in life, where it's you really have to manage your own and touch grass and be yo, you. So with that, I became very interested in what you're doing, even at the start of when you were creating the inception of it, and we'll talk about later on in the interview. But yeah, I think what you're doing is great. I think that it's a lot of people see stuff like this as corny and salacious, and you're trying to do this certain type of manipulation and stuff, but it's kind of the authenticity goes through, everything else gets cheeseclothed out. Yeah. And then you kind of people, you start to get the reputation that you deserve, if that makes sense. You kind of just have to kind of out. Yeah. And go through it. But yeah, so the conversation today is going to revolve around that, and kind of into your mindset and kind of how you're bringing that forth in these initiatives and creating an association, and how your work life or transitioning into this work life kind of allowed you to gain this perspective to find the need for it, right?
Yeah.
So kind of start me off with coming from oil and gas, and then going into public service. What did that look like for you? Was that a big transition?
Yeah, it was a big transition. So in 2015, I got kicked to the curb by the oil and gas. Another downturn came around and I got laid off.
Right.
So for the next 5 years, I kicked around trying to find permanent work. I'd just find seasonal here and there. Yeah, I worked for a paving crew doing the base work. I spent a winter out on a drilling rig in Saskatchewan, which was tough, being away from the kids. And then the ad came out for correctional peace officer. So I applied and I got on with the remand center. And then I spent 3 years there. It was a good time. I really enjoyed my time there, but it's a huge transition going from oil and gas into the public service.
Now, what did you do with oil and gas, if you don't mind me asking?
I spent about 16 years in the oil field rental industry.
Okay.
So I did hot shots for a bunch of years and then was promoted to manager.
Okay.
So I spent a bunch of years as manager for those companies.
Right.
And then, things hit the bottom and I squared it.
What kind of led you away from oil and gas? Was it the traveling away? Was it was that the biggest thing that deterred you? Was it the shifts? Was it because it's when you look at even corrections, for example, it's there's probably like pretty near close to cons, you know what I mean? Like when you're looking at it, you're like, okay, like this is marginally better.
Yeah.
So kind of like, what was that tipping point?
The biggest tipping point for me was job stability.
Okay.
You know, I had been hit by the downturn 4 times throughout my career. So I got laid off 4 times. So spending upwards of a year unemployed with no, just EI, which isn't much.
No.
With a family, I have 4 kids myself, so
yeah,
it was tough, especially when you come from oil and gas wages.
Yeah.
To live on government wages, it was brutal. So
yeah.
the job stability was the biggest factor for staying in public service.
And what was your original response to like working in? Because like for me, before I got into like corrections, I worked like a shit ton of security jobs. Like so I started off, my first security job was a high school football game, and that like sucked. But then I went into like hospital security and this and that, and I kind of like stacked my bricks, and like I did like investigations for the liquor corporation, and I did like some managing, and I did this and I did that, and then I got like a government job because in Nova Scotia it was like super sparse. They probably hired like 12 people a year for the entire province.
Wow.
So it was a huge competition. But even going from that, where there was moments where you're like, okay, like I'm not scanning groceries, and not to minimize that job, but you're like, there is a little bit of risk involved.
Yeah.
But then taking that like huge, like taking a leap like that, it's like, oh, was there this huge like come to Jesus moment where you're like, oh, this is not an ordinary job?
So I think my experience in oil and gas, dealing with the rough and tumble that are in the industry.
Yeah.
And then on top of being a parent of 4 kids, I remember my first week, I was looking at the unit and I'm like, man, I was made for this job. I should have been topped out
years ago.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. So, like it was the easiest transition from private to public that I've ever experienced. It was phenomenal. It's
really interesting too, because it's kind of like you would fall into like the Old Testament of things, of like, maybe it wasn't necessary, like you did have that experience, but like you could almost chunk that out or categorize it as like life experience, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So then it goes like, okay, well, what's the argument that like there should be like a higher age point of like starting in a public job like this, right? And like, how do you gauge maturity, if that makes sense? Because like there's people that come in at like 19, 20 who are like stellar, and then other people where you're like, you definitely didn't get enough like good, just nothing, like where you're just like, I don't even know where to start. Right. Yeah. Where it's like you need to just go do a year of doing anything else and come back, and it will do any like, but right now it's like no bueno, right?
Yeah.
But I think that's a huge problem, but like your would be the kind of example of like the life experience and like having that in.
Yeah, it's a huge advantage for somebody. Like I was 40 years old when I got into corrections.
Right.
So super long in the tooth and late in life, and having that maturity and experience definitely gives you a benefit.
Do you think that kind of accelerated your ability for like advocating? You know what I mean? Because I think you would see a lot more of that in like later stages of people's career. Yeah. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
But I think you kind of already had the foresight, if that makes sense, to like understand it. And that like I always whenever I'm like teaching people or like doing any training, I always reference like Neo in the Matrix. It's like eventually like things start to like, you can start to see the flow charts of things of like, oh, this, but it's not really just this. It's like, right? And then this has 5 flow, right? So you can really go into it, and but you have to kind of be able to put some things on autopilot. Yeah. If that makes sense, right? And like you can't do one without having this cog turning to even start learning about this. Yeah. Because it's like you're constantly being like pulled in so many different directions. So if you don't have the fundamentals, and like the fundamentals for something like corrections is just like your ability to like handle criticism.
Yeah.
And it's like if you don't have like that or emotional maturity or something, it's like not alone the communication skills, de-escalation, etc., etc. So it's again off on a little tangent, but it is very interesting, right? Yeah. And so during your time in corrections, you kind of started that like role of like advocating. So like where did that kind of start? And like did you have like a foundation of doing this like in any like organizational role in oil and gas, or was this something where it was more of like an emotionally charged like thing where you were like, oh, I can see like the benefit of it?
Yeah, so I would say it started in corrections. You know, I've always been sympathetic and empathetic to people throughout my life, but it wasn't until in corrections we had an officer attempt suicide that I realized there was a need for more peer-to-peer action, I guess. We needed to raise awareness and reduce stigma. So at the time, I had a hobby of branding clothing and selling it just on the side. So I created a brand called Code 9 Canada. And we raised funds through selling apparel branded as such. And we sent those funds to charities like Badge of Life Canada, who helps first responders and other frontline personnel with mental health and suicide prevention. So that's where that started. And then it was hard because it was Canada wide. It's such a broad such a broad audience that it's hard to grow the way you want it to grow, because you're trying to reach out to 11
and you don't
provinces.
you want to make sure it's getting out to the people that need it, not just like getting out there, right? Like you're trying to target a certain demographic. So
and at that point too, it was towards the end of Code 9, I wanted to do more hands-on stuff, like with peers stuff. So I decided to shut down Code 9 and create the Alberta First Responders Association. So a good friend of mine, we're sitting on a unit, and that's when we came up with the name for the association, and that's where it started.
Yeah, it's really cool. And like, what type of teaching did you have to like give yourself in terms of like, because when I was doing my research, I had to like research, well, like what actually is an association? Like what is the purpose, right? And so again, like it's essentially like you're like building a group of advocates, if that makes sense.
Yep.
It's basically just like a group of advocates. You guys all share like the same type of mission, and you guys are doing what you can in like your personal life or whatever it is to kind of advocate for what the group is trying to do, essentially.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And then you guys can use like collaborative efforts and like gain funding and stuff like that. But how did that work on your part? Like, what were some initial like hurdles that you had to go through?
So I had never done anything like that before, right? So I had to teach myself how to go through the process of creating an association, and then I taught myself and ended up registering as a nonprofit.
Right.
So there's resources that'll help you do that, but they cost money. So I didn't want to spend money that I couldn't let out. So I just did it myself, and the government was pretty helpful with any questions or issues that came up with the application.
Right.
So I ended up thumbing my way through it, and we made it work.
Well, and I'm sure that gives you like, I think the idea of like the more kind of work it takes, the more like valuable it is to you, and like it's all like there's all a rebound effect where you're like, I might be being punished now, or like something's not going right, or like something failed on some avenue, but then you're like, eventually like this will turn around, right?
Yeah.
I always like, you can't get struck by lightning twice. So, and hopefully that's true. Yeah. But now you're creating this now. So when did this this was in between corrections and sheriffs doing the name change?
Yeah.
Correct. So then kind of like who did you need to get on board in order to make this work?
So it just comes down to the first responders on the front lines. The bigger the group, the more success you're going to have. It was tough because we started from a 0-person page or group, a closed group, and it was only available to first responders. So, inviting my colleagues from the remand and the sheriffs, and then growing from there. So, I had a lot of help from all the people that I've worked with in the past.
Right.
That made a big difference.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can see that in a job like that where like the risk is so high that people's like association to people is like very, very strong, where like a lot of jobs you don't really see that, and you don't really get a peek into someone's life like that. So although the job is daunting, also like how close you get, like, because I always tell people that are starting, like, I don't know about you, but I don't have 100 friends.
Yeah.
And like, how do I know everything about everybody, treat everybody like it's impossible, right? So like you're almost set up to fail.
Yeah.
So about these like managing expectations, right, where you kind of have to have this idea of like, man, I'm not going to please everybody, and like
tough.
Right? And it's really tough, and like now you're going through that and probably going through managing that transition between jobs. Like, how do you maintain that stability in order to like want to grow this? Like, is there anything that you have that like you have to set up in your own like personal life in order to like have that well-being to like keep you driving?
So I don't really have anything other than this. This is what keeps me going.
Right.
It's a mental health support for me by doing this.
Right.
So, yeah, this is my therapy at the end of the day.
Yeah, and that's it's very admirable, because like you don't see that a lot, and you don't see people going like, what's in it for me? Like I think that's a huge like sentiment in today's age. Like, yeah, I can do it and we're friends, but we're not friends enough where like I'm actually gonna like shell out money, or you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, where like I think society has created like there's always been that thing of like, yeah, I'll pick you up for gas money and this and that, but I think it's like a whole nother level. Given like how expensive shit is and everything.
Well, and that's the thing with the association, is one of the biggest stressors for any first responder, probably really any person, is financial health. That's probably the biggest stressor that we see across the board there. So we wanted to make sure that we weren't adding to that stress. We try and provide free or close to free training so that we're not adding to that stress.
But why? This is my question though. Why? Yes, financial stress, but how are we addressing that beforehand? Like, now, is like financial health should be a discussion with 40-year-old people, right? Like, like that's what I think about, right? Where it's like it doesn't need it, and like how is this being set up? Is this like a culture thing where it's like, yo, work, and like as much overtime as you can get, and then it's this huge illusion of like you're making checks where you think you're making $200,000 a year, and it's just not realistic. No. But nobody tells you. Like it's seen as like a badge of honor if like every shift knows you and like everybody knows your name, and like, so how do we get around that type of like stigma around cash flow and like this and that? Like that's my biggest worry when it comes to like when you see that that's like a prevalent thing, where it's like, well, how, So
one of the things that we're working on is we're working with a couple ATB members,
right,
to develop a program just for first responders on financial health. Nobody wants to be lectured, so that's not what we're trying to build. We're trying to build a program that we can teach first responders on what they can do, just little changes in their lives, so that they can improve their health, their wealth health.
Right.
So that's what we're working on, and we're hoping to deploy that this year. You can take the training, you cannot take the training, it's up to you. It's going to be free training, so why not, right? So.
And now when usually I always assume this is like consistent across the board, but like the same type of things that you're doing with the foundation, or the same type of morals, do you find like this is also like quote unquote like a lifestyle thing too, where it's like you have to buy in, right? And I was just talking to another guest this morning, Alexander Krushke, and Krushke. I'm butchering it. It's but he's talking about the idea of like it's only gonna like work if you want it to work. Like if you don't have the buy-in and like it really doesn't matter, right?
Yeah.
So like, do you find yourself like also like carrying this type of attitude, and like when you talk about like being available for peer support, do you also see yourself in real life being available for that?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. So when I first met my wife, I had crap credit. You know, the oil patch kicked me in the junk.
Right.
And with that, my credit took a nosedive because I lost the house, vehicles, everything.
Right.
Even the ex went away. So I lost it all. And so I had to rebuild. And I didn't have that knowledge prior to meeting my wife. So she helped me grow financially, learning as I went on the proper ways of handling money.
Right.
So I definitely bought into that, and I support that 100%.
And then it's kind of like then when these ideas or initiatives are getting developed, it's on the idea that it's like personal experience, right? And I think that's so important in terms of like transparency of like no, I also like fell into the same, like it's not me like telling you
preaching.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly, right? Where I think that's one of the biggest things of saying like, are we not like doing the same thing? Like, you know what I mean? Like, and now here we are and we're on this like different level, but it's like, that's a very difficult challenge of like, well, how do I bring it back down and say like, no, I'm trying to like establish things for people. Like, I'll give you an example. I was tasked with, doing just following up with people, letting them know, hey, you haven't finished your OH&S training, you got to do your OH&S training. And it was a simple thing. I created just a little like brief blurb. Hey, you were on this list I was given. I was tasked to do this, blah 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 blah. If you want to do it, do it. If not, I've set up laptops in the training room if you have time, if you can't find your way into it or you need help. So if you're new or whatever it is, come up to the training room. Like, and I would say 80% of the feedback was negative.
Why?
Right? Where you're just like, all I'm trying to do is, and I don't even give a fuck if you do it.
Right.
Like that's, if you told me like some people were like, beat it nerd, fuck off, save the speeches for the new guys,
right.
Blah, blah, blah. And you're like, pourquoi? What the fuck? Like, I'm just, and honestly, I took the brunt of it. Just try, like, I didn't have to do any of this, and like I was just asked to do it, and I care about my coworkers.
You stepped up,
and it's a huge deterrent.
Yeah,
like it's a huge deterrent to be like, well, I'm never doing this the fuck again. Like fuck this, right?
Huge kick in the dink when you get shut down
and
like that.
It's one of those things where it's like I always tell people like, if people like everybody has like their, oh, this is what I'm going to do to fix this. This is what I'm going to do to fix this. And you just have to change the schedule and you just have to change this. And you just have, it's like, no, like at some point it's deeper rooted in like a culture where it's like, no, you have to establish like better like practices of like treating people and like how like new staff are integrated and just like the whole 9 yards. Right. Yeah. But again, it's, And I was baffled, and I couldn't care less. Like I slept great that night. It didn't matter. But like the idea that like, why, like even if you didn't want to do it, why didn't you just ignore it?
Right.
Like it just doesn't.
Way to be a
so
dick.
Yeah, it's like so now you're like purposely punching me in the face. Like I just don't understand, right?
Yeah.
Where you're like, where does this come from, right? And like, do you kind of have moments where like you fall into like these like disappointment, or have you ever gotten like harsh criticism or something that you were like, oh, am I really doing what I think I'm doing?
Quite often, yeah. If you follow the group at all, you'll see that there get some heated discussions, specifically around who's a first responder. That one always opens a can of worms, and it ends up with people leaving the group because they're so passionate about who's not a first responder. So it's very frustrating because I just want to build a community that's going to come together and be there for each other.
Yeah.
And the more first responders, the better. Right?
And on that, it's like you also like when you decide to, and again, it's like fair on them for just deciding to leave.
Yeah.
And it is what it is, but it's kind of that idea of like, well, if this isn't something for you, then like, but I think that kind of, I think that isn't like a sentiment anymore. Like people have to speak their mind and like get the last word, and you can't just be like, hey, listen, like I interviewed a lady 2-3 days ago. Her name was Boobzilla, and she is in paranormal circ, and like her act is like a performance act, and I invited her on the show, and I explicitly told her like I might not believe in like a lot of the shit you're pushing, or like I might think like some of the stuff you're doing, but like it's not for me to like give a shit. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And like not in like I'm dismissing you or I'm like putting you aside. Like I can respect that you're making a living off like putting leg shackles on your tits, attaching it to a keg, and like swinging it around.
Wow.
It's like, but that's one of the acts. And like I told her, I looked around the room and you could legit see people where they're like, oh, they're probably going to report this. You know what I mean? Like they're going to, and not only that, I interview her, and during the discussion, she said like, there's like people, it's in 13 and over. If you're 13 to 17, you need a parent.
Yeah.
And then 17 plus, you can do whatever. And then people got front row tickets, snuck their 6-year-old kid in, and then complained about like the lewdness of the show.
Wow.
And you're just like, what is going on here, right? Like it doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah.
So again, like going back to it, I think like just people, like even if you're in the wrong, people just want to like shit on people. Like it's crazy.
Some people love drama.
But how do you like, are there certain things like you put in place to like filter this type of like what type of like moderation do you have in terms of like whether it be at events or whether it be like, is there that type of like moderation, or do you find like it's like once you get closer to a live event, it probably is less frequent?
Yeah. We rarely have to intervene in a discussion on the group. But we have intervened. We've shut off comments.
Yeah.
We've deleted comments. I've personally messaged people who've posted several times and had discussions because what they're saying isn't right for that audience.
Right.
So you can delete it yourself, or I will.
Right.
We try not to censor people, but we did prior to the election.
Yeah.
Have to shut down anything political.
Yeah.
Because it's such a polarizing topic.
And it's just like it can go so long. Like it just at some point where you're like, up is down and left is right, and it just nothing like because we're just going off, right?
Oh yeah.
But again, like it's a huge balance of like what am I allowed, and like what I always say is like who's the arbiter of truth? Like who's the person that actually decides like who's to say I'm bringing the right guests on? Who's to say you're interacting with the right like collaborators and organizations? Like what if we have this interview, I post and I go kill someone? And then you're like, oh fuck, I can't be like attached to, right? So it's just one of those things where you just have to be aware and be like, yo, I might piss this person off, I might not like this person, and like I understand my attention as long as do my due diligence to like make this a safe space and not like rug pull people. Then like whatever way this goes is gonna be all right, because you just understand. That's just what the game is, right?
Exactly, yeah.
So it's like I wouldn't go sign up for boxing if I didn't want to get punched in the face, right? So it's like if you're advocating for a group, there's going to be people that are advocating against it, right? But that's a hard reality, and I'm sure like growing up, it probably took like a good amount of time to like, obtain that type of emotional maturity.
Yeah, well, I grew up with a twin brother who wasn't exactly the most well behaved.
Right.
So I learned a lot from his mistakes.
Mhm.
I'd sit back and watch and learn and yeah. So not much gets under my skin, but when it does, it's
Yeah.
hard to hold that back.
Yeah, I kind of like go off the bandwagon sometimes with some people's comments, but it's usually comments against the guests. And then you're like, okay, it's borderline where like this person deserves to say it, but it's also like kind of rude. And I don't want me leaving it advocating for what this guy's doing, but I don't want to take it down saying like you can't say anything, you can have no criticism.
Yeah.
But he basically said her voice was annoying. And I was like, fuck, man, like, I guess like you're allowed
that's all
to,
you can pick apart.
you know what I mean? But I was
Yeah.
like, yeah, man. Or like some guy said I should stop saying like in every word. I just said thanks for the feedback. You know, like
Yeah.
it wasn't. Yeah, we're kind of like, so. Explain to me like the ideas of like running these galas and like how was that something that stood out as something that you wanted to do as opposed to like anything else?
So the gala was an idea of a member of ours. He's like, why don't we get together and just have some food and drinks and get to know one another.
Right.
So we ran with that and we jacked it up. We went and decided to have a gala. So our first one was at the Italian Center. We had 250 people come out.
That's crazy.
So we filled the hall. We had over 50 silent auction items. We raised just shy of $40,000 and was able to donate $21,500 to
That's insane.
nonprofits and charities that we worked with. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, like
So.
and that's like a good testament to show like, oh, and also like putting your little fun bag of tricks. It's the idea that like, yo, the life cycle is complete now. Like what you did as an association like completed its job. So it's like nobody can really say that you're a fraud.
Right.
It's
we
like
were successful.
Yeah, it's like you did, even if it was once.
Yeah.
Like I had someone at work come walk by me and they said, hey, like I watched the episode where you had Sharif on and like even as a Muslim I learned new things. Thank you. You're like, I'm good.
Awesome.
Like that's it.
Yeah.
Like I don't need to do anything else. I'm good.
Yeah.
Like life cycle
win.
complete.
Yeah.
Right. So it's that idea where it's like even when people go like yeah you're full of shit or you did this, it's like I never promised I was gonna do it right every time.
Yeah.
Like you got to throw things at the wall and see what sticks.
Exactly.
And then you also like it's like this gala thing was a success.
Yeah.
You might set something up in 5 years time, and it's like well that didn't work. And it's like you just got to be like, what points did we not hit? We were aiming for this, we hit this.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like, okay, you take that, you move that, right?
Yeah.
But again, like it's a hard road, and like yeah, I always say like I always when I have people on, I like it's one of those things where it's easy to say you're an advocate. It's easy to say,
Yeah.
oh, I'm an advocate of this awareness. I'm an advocate of this.
Yeah.
But it's like, what are you actually doing?
Yeah.
Right? And
Wearing a ribbon.
yeah.
Yeah.
Right? And some of it, it's like, okay, like maybe you're like maybe some way you can justify it. But like I always ask people like who come on and like they're an advocate for even a woman that she was doing a steps for epilepsy. Her brother was epileptic and this was a fundraiser. But I said like in a day-to-day life, like what do you do? Like, because I know for me, like as an advocate, I'm just not an asshole to people. I'm just patient with people.
Yeah.
Like say what you want, do what you will. Like, because I have no idea what your life is like. I have no idea what you've experienced or are about to go to.
That's the thing.
So it's like, even if you suck, I'm still going to be like, thank you, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Like, because it's, I know from personal experience that rubs me the wrong way.
Yeah.
So it's like, it's just that simple, right?
Yeah.
And like, but I think some people kind of, you know what I mean? Like it's very easy to say like I advocate, but then it's another thing to like put forward and start an association or just like change your behavior and stuff.
Yeah.
So like, was that something you had to have a shift with? Did you need to like shift that, like your focus in terms of like what you wanted to do or like what your intentions were? Where like some people like they just want to work on their own things and like not be bothered. Like, did you have a shift to like an outward focus?
So our first gala, we weren't registered at that point. We didn't know what the future looked like, but after the success of that night, we instantly were like, yeah, we're registering as a nonprofit. And then with that, we pivoted to providing free training for mental health supports. So yeah, we definitely pivoted there and put into action not just organizing fun events, but also giving people what they need so that they can survive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And did you also see there were like high numbers in certain like disciplines, if that makes sense?
Like agency types?
Yeah, like paramedics as opposed to corrections, as opposed to federal versus provincial. Like, was there anything that like stood out?
So we're pretty heavy on corrections and
Yeah.
EMS.
Given
Yeah.
like the origin.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's natural.
Yeah.
But lots of EMS and that's a thankless job too.
Well, and I have one of the statistics I wrote down was like paramedics rate of PTSD 5 times higher than the rate of the general population. It's like
It's probably low.
yeah, and like it's crazy. And when you look at like the stats across Canada and like how much higher it is of like public service personnel and like all different types of like work through the public service, it's or just law enforcement or healthcare, or like there has to be more avenues, and it's like apparent. It's just it's apparent, right? You see it across the board, and it's like what you're doing is very, very, very good, and it's reaching out. Like in 2 years, a growth of 2,200. That's
We're actually
even
just
more.
coming up to 3,000.
There you go.
Yeah.
Exactly, and that's kind of a testament of like growth too,
Yeah.
because like a lot of this, like it really just depends on like the person behind the wheel, and like
Yeah.
it's this whole like podcast is like we want people to like toot their own horn. We want people to like really like this is to talk your shit, right? Like, and yeah, like it takes someone who's like not only creative but like flexible, you know, and like dedicated to the cause, right? So
Yeah.
like you have to give yourself a lot of credit, because even just like trying to do it is
Yeah.
hard enough.
Yeah. it
And
is.
not only that, even just doing the job in like working with sheriffs or law enforcement, it's like that's hard enough on its own.
Yeah.
And you see so many people are crippled by that. So the fact that you're able to kind of see that through and be like a shining light for people is huge. Where am I at here? With running this, do you like how structured is your life? How much consideration of a balance do you actually need to like day by day focus on? Is it pretty much autopilot, or is it like for me, me and Emily and I, we have like a Google Calendar, and like I got to put in everything.
Yeah.
Because like if not, like it's just gonna be dysfunctional, right?
Yeah.
So do you? How do you do that to like maintain your focus and stuff?
Yeah, so we have a Google Calendar as well, and we have probably 8 individuals in AFRA that have our AFRA email address.
Right.
So it's very busy. It's very structured,
Yeah.
and it's tough being everybody has a day job,
Mm-hmm.
because a lot of our meetings and stuff are after hours.
Right.
So that's another, because you got kids with sports. I'm fortunate that as a court sheriff, I work Monday to Friday.
Right.
So that gives me a lot of time on weekends and evenings to do a lot, and it gets busier as you come up to an event. But then, like after the last gala, we had a nice break for
Right.
a month and a half to just relax. And
Do you find it like with the people that are involved in the organization? I'm assuming it's volunteer, right?
Yep.
So how do you like? What's your relationship with like having to like schedule people and manage people's time, and like what consideration do you have for people, and like do you try to like put yourself and then like, because for me, like I have a dynamic where like Richard and Lawson, Mark, we both do a podcast outside of this.
Okay.
And like the ability that I have to like be careful how much I ask and like how much I keep people on task. And it's like a very fine line of like, okay, if I was asked to do this, would I be like, all right, now's enough? You know what I mean? Like, I'm good. And then you're like, well, this person, not necessarily, and this is nothing on like anybody I know, but for example, if someone's not stepping up to the plate, how do you push them too hard and put too much on them? They're like, fuck this, I quit.
Yeah.
Right? And like, how do you deal with that as like someone that's actually like dealing with all of it, right?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I try not to delegate too much. I try to give suggestions and hope people will pick up and run with it.
Right.
One of our director of, he's got a fancy name, director of growth. He's his name is Brian Ho, and he does a lot of our marketing and planning. He does sponsorships as well, and so him, I don't have to delegate anything. He knows what he's doing. Yeah, it's not his first rodeo in this type of avenue.
Right.
It is in the first responder world.
Right.
And he's had to learn a lot because he's the one who actually organized and orchestrated the round table.
Okay.
He came up with all the program, the questions, the guidelines, and so he's done a fantastic job on that. And then there's other ones who, yeah, I'll be a board member, and then don't do anything. Right. So,
and it's like, how do you manage that of like, yo, I want what you're willing to give, and I kind of need you to know that it's not up to where I think it should be. Yeah. But I don't want to say it because if I do, you're probably done, right? So it's and on top of that, like you also have to consider too, like, you know, what was their expectation? What were they signed up to do? Yeah. And like how much does like your vision change, and then you're trying to like convince people of something that was never even a thing? Like, do you feel like sometimes now that you're building like a baseline of like what you got going on, and get out of there, dog, of what you got going on in operations, where you're like, well, now I have to be careful of like what direction I steer this in, because like now I'm talking for a group of people. I'm not just talking for myself.
And that's a tough part, because we went from just me and my wife to having this group of,
and you could just put it out.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And now it's like, hey,
now we have responsibilities, and we have to answer to other people. Even though we're the founders and the president, we still, we have that obligation to give everybody a voice.
And like coming down to like simple advocating, it's a courtesy.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Exactly,
like it's just a professional courtesy. Yeah. And like as simple as that is, like, you know, but yeah, it's one of those things where I even, again, 2 people, and we're just running like a small, even trying to like manage it between like Emily and her work schedule, and like what days, you know, like, and then being like, I also have to go to bed and I have 5 hours before I have to be up and go, you know what I mean? It's like, this isn't even something that I'm getting paid for. Like, what the fuck? Like, you know, exactly, so that's where people kind of, I think, but again, it's like, you have to think about, like, I always ask myself like questions at the end of certain periods of time, where you go like, what does success look like to me? Yeah. Is it monetary? Is it not monetary? Yeah. Like there's totally different versions of success, right? Like 2 things can be true at once. You didn't make any money personally, but you also had a successful event, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So like it's just, I think it's very grueling, and I think like it takes just a lot of like dedication.
Yeah, it does.
You know. What did I have in here? Where do you see the association in the next 5 years? Any plans that you have in place? Anything that we haven't discussed so far that you have in the pipeline?
Yeah, so we're on the outcome of our roundtable symposium. We're going to be sitting down with the GOA, one of the deputy ministers, to discuss the results of the roundtable symposium, and we're building a program based on the results and the feedback from the group on improving health within the first responder community. I can't get into details because it's
Of
not
course.
launched yet, but we're really excited about that.
Got some things on the
Yeah. And then, so last year our focus was providing mental health support training to first responders.
right.
And we were hoping for more of the same this year based on the AMSA grants
Right.
that are available. But their focus this year is on training trainers. So
Right.
we're looking to put together a team of trainers across the province who can go out in their communities or travel to communities near them and provide free training for our first responders across the province. So we have, I think I put forward 12 names today on
wow.
people who volunteered across the province. And well, we actually had 24 volunteers, but based on the criterias that are required, I picked 12.
Wow.
So yeah, that's our goal, to build that pool of trainers, and then next year hit the bricks hard and start giving more training. We're still going to put more training forward this year. We're going to find grants and programs that are available now so that we can continue that, because we want to focus on offering that help,
Right.
but all the while still building our pool.
Yeah, and not like massively expanding to a point where you can't keep up with it.
Yeah, exactly.
Kind of rounding out, like, do you think there's any levels of changes provincially or federally that could kind of gain Canada or like Alberta in general, first responders, more support?
So it always comes down to funding.
Yeah.
We always need more funding in the mental health. One of the biggest factors is not reliant on the government. It's the companies, the organizations,
Yeah.
is the employee assistance programs.
Yeah.
That's the biggest challenge for anybody seeking help, is those programs. I experienced it myself when I was in a dark spot. Trying to get actual help from a human being who spoke my language and had my background was near impossible.
Yeah.
I wasn't planning suicide, but I was, like the world would be better off without me.
Right.
And I had a hell of a time trying to find help.
Yeah. And
So-
then you say if you're experiencing it,
Yeah.
it's like how many people
Yeah.
if you're talking about it, how many people are experiencing it and not talking about
Yeah.
it, right? So that's the scary part.
It was probably a week or more before I actually spoke to somebody. And like I said, I wasn't planning, so I did want to go to the emergency room.
Right.
I didn't want to burden them with my crap.
But the idea that,
Yeah.
you know what I mean, even getting to that point where you're
It
like,
was tough.
uh-oh. And again, like, that's probably a huge driving force to, like, why
Yeah.
you want to do this
Yeah.
dog, man. This freaking dog. But closing out, what do you, why do you think our conversation matters today?
Well, I'd like to say we want to get to 0 suicides, but realistically, that's never going to happen. But if we can get near 0, we'll be
Yeah.
happy. If we can
Sorry.
It's okay.
Come here, dog. Sorry.
That's okay. If we can improve the lives of, any of our members, we're successful. I just wish we could save them all.
Yeah,
Yeah.
of course.
Yeah.
Well, I think we're on a good step to doing that.
Yeah.
I think what you have in place and your plans for the future and the skills and experience that you have leading that, and I'm sure the team around you are gonna, hopefully, push the needle, right? Like
That's right. Yeah.
and get things moving and provide those initiatives and programs for first responders that need it, right?
Yeah.
I know as well as a first responder how hard the job is, and there is a need for that because there isn't a lot of people that share the same view like this.
Yeah.
There's an overwhelming negative attitude.
Yeah.
And that needs to be changed because it's just it's just going to be something that people, like, everybody suffers. It's like you wonder why we have like problems getting raises. You wonder why there's this stigma around it. It's like it's a lot of like we're eating our own hand, right?
Yeah.
So it's we got to change the mindset.
Yeah.
But with that, thank you very much for coming out, having
thanks
this
for having me.
conversation. I think growing awareness in your association and what you're doing, as well as, mental health recognition and awareness with first responders, I think that's huge, right? So anything we can do in towards of pushing this message forward, we're going to be featuring all of your socials and websites and all of that in the description below.
Okay.
But yeah, this is it's an ongoing challenge, right? And it's going to develop over time, and it
just takes buy-in.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It just takes buy-in. And again, thank you very much.
Thank you.
For the audience, I really hope you enjoyed this conversation. A lot of it is on a serious note, but this is a conversation that needs to be had. This is something that affects lives of thousands of people, and So if you ever need help, reach out to associations like Jerry's, or associations that we'll put below in the comments that you can gain support from. And with that, don't forget to like, subscribe, share, send this to someone who you thinks needs this. And until next time, spare bedroom.